I'm Joe Kahne. I'm a professor of education at Mills College, and for the past several years I've been studying the relationship between youth participation with new media and their civic and political engagement. So there's a lot of interest right now, I think appropriately so, in young people's civic and political engagement. For many years, young people were participating less and less in both informal civic activities and in the political process. And recently there's been somewhat of a turnaround where young people are participating more. So people have been interested, or we've been very interested in the role that new media plays in all of that. Increasingly, young people and all citizens are getting more and more of their information over the internet. They're doing more and more to communicate with each other. They're being recruited into activities over the internet, and they're expressing their opinions and trying to mobilize other people using new media. So it was an interesting opportunity to take a look at whether or not the ways they participated were related to their overall levels of civic and political engagement. Well, in particular, we looked at two things. We looked at whether or not young people participated in what we called interest-based online participation. So that would be things that weren't necessarily about civic or political issues at all, but were about things they cared about. It could have been fan sites, it could have been being a member of an online community, it could have been creating music or sending things to other people about other forms of artistic creation that they did online. And we looked at whether or not those forms of participation were related to later civic and political engagement. What we found, which was very interesting, was that even when young people weren't doing things online that had explicit civic or political components, they appeared to be picking up the skills and the orientations that led them to increase their overall level of civic and political participation. For example, young people were more likely to volunteer if they had had some of these experiences in interest-based communities online, but they're more likely to volunteer offline. They were more likely to be a part of groups that focused on community issues. And all of this is with controls for the amount of those activities, the volunteering or the community issue participation, that they did prior. So in other words, if you took two young people who both had the same levels of volunteering and charitable work, the ones who did online interest-based participation were more likely to volunteer later than the ones who didn't. Why might there be changes in people's civic and political participation based on what they do digitally? We think there are a couple of possible explanations that came through the study. One is that they may be picking up skills and doing everything from learning how to be effective as a leader in an online community to figuring out how to find information and share it with others. One of the things we really were wondering about is whether or not when young people go online and are part of these interest-based communities, they end up in what some people have described as echo chambers. Places where they only hear from people who think like them about issues. And a lot of people have been worried that you only hear the political views that you already believe, so it reinforces them, and it would lead to a more segregated society in many respects, and certainly not the kind of democratic dialogue that we need for democracy to truly function. What we found was very interesting, that when people go online as part of interest-based communities, they're actually exposed both to people who disagree with them and to people who agree with them. The big difference isn't between people who go online and talk with people who agree with them versus people who go online and talk with people who disagree with them. The big difference is that some people have discussions about issues with people who they agree with and people they disagree with. And some people have almost no discussions about issues. And so what interest-based communities do is they promote discussions about issues, both with people who agree with them and with people who disagree with them. The other interesting thing that we found related to this is that when people have those discussions about issues in what we're calling an online democratic community, a place where they hear both people who disagree and people who agree, when people have those experiences, they're more likely to be involved in volunteer work, in charitable work, in civic and political issues, they're more likely to vote, they're more likely to work on campaigns, they're more likely to work on community issues. They're also more likely to say that they appreciate diversity in viewpoints than when people don't experience online democratic communities. We did see that young people are going online to share their perspectives, and one thing that's very interesting about new media as compared to many other forms of media is that it provides that opportunity for young people to be active participants and contributors, as opposed to, say, reading a newspaper where you can consume information, but there are not very many opportunities to share information. Through blogs, through these interest-based communities, there are many opportunities for young people to share their perspectives as well as to hear the perspectives of others. One thing that I think is exciting about this study is I think it does begin to give parents some ideas about some of the kinds of things they might want to look for as they think about whether or not their child's experience online might be valuable for them. We found that being a part of interest-based communities can be quite valuable. In other words, it doesn't isolate kids and separate them or distract them from other forms of participation in social life. Quite the contrary, we found that when young people do things like write blogs, read blogs, comment on blogs, join fan communities, do things online that relate to hobbies, those kinds of activities actually lead them to be more socially integrated in terms of things like volunteerism, talking about community issues, being exposed to a wide range of viewpoints, learning to appreciate the importance of diversity. So one implication for parents is that it would be quite potentially desirable to take a look not just at how much time your child spends online or doing things with new media, but whether that time is spent really exploring and contributing in relation to what interests them versus other kinds of much more passive activity. Because we did find that the more passive activity was not related to any of those goals. It didn't particularly hurt, but it didn't, for example, to talk on your cell phone with a friend didn't particularly promote or detract from many of these forms of participation.